Welcome to my first ever episode of Predestined Purpose. I'm Saroya Ann, and I'm starting this podcast to talk about God's working hand in my life through all the trials and tribulations I've faced. Over the past couple of years, I have experienced a massive amount of issues, from health to flooding in my home to financial problems. Beyond that, my life has been filled with a lot of struggles. Through it all, I have seen the Lord's hand and support, His goodness, His guidance, and His providence. I went to school for broadcast journalism, and I've worked for companies such as NBC, Newsweek, and Jurassic World. I've always been a very independent woman, from living in New York to living in LA, but that all changed about 2 years ago when I started having health problems, which is another huge reason why I wanted to start this podcast. Today, I'm joined with my mom, Saroya Ann, and we'll be diving into my diagnosis, what brought me back home, and why I still believe the Lord is good. So we're going to start off by talking about when I came back from Hollywood and came back home to my hometown, living with my parents. So I was in LA about 10 months, and I was there about the time when COVID started, a little bit before and then starting in that time period. I was working in Beverly Hills, and I was actually working for a talent agency. But at the time, they dwindled down everything and they closed the office. But the team that I was on, we still were coming into the office, but we were coming individually. So this office was originally filled with about 300 employees, but now I was in there all by myself. So it was pretty scary. And this was around the time when all of the riots started happening. There was even down the street from us, some people who spray painted on one of the buildings, "Eat the Rich." So it was extremely scary.
I remember just thinking about you driving on the freeway and how there was nobody else driving on the freeway. And I remember all the riots going on and just this sense of where is everybody, and you're all by yourself, and what a scary feeling that must be. But all I could do is pray for you.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about that, Reagan.
Yeah, so around that time, I didn't want to be in LA anymore. For a long time, I had wanted to live away from here, away from home. I wanted to live in LA. I wanted to work in Hollywood. I enjoyed it. But during that time, I wanted to get out of there. And so I was driving back and forth to my hometown, visiting family. And I just started to pray that the Lord would make it clear that I wasn't supposed to live there anymore. I asked Him a couple of things that would make it clear to me that I would lose my parking spot, that my roommates would leave, and also that I would lose my job. And so those things actually did start to happen. I lost my parking spot, and if any of you have ever lived in LA, you know that it's actually sometimes pretty scary on certain streets. And so when no one was around and I'm parking on the street instead of in the parking garage, it was a scary feeling. So then shortly after that, my roommates, one of them officially moved back to New Jersey, and she was still paying and everything, but she decided to go work from home over there. And then my second roommate, she didn't move back, but she was pretty much gone all of the time, either on trips or at home, or I honestly don't know where she was for most of it. But she was gone most of the time, so that answered that prayer request. And then when visiting home one day, went home to visit and got a call that I lost my job.
Right.
Yeah,
that was frightening. And I do remember also when you were in LA and you had lost your parking spot, you would call me while you were driving around and around and around the whole neighborhood trying to find a parking spot, sometimes for an hour at a time, to the point where you would just start crying because you didn't know what to do because you couldn't come home.
Yeah.
And the Lord always provided that parking spot, but I remember that feeling of helplessness, knowing you were far away and I couldn't do anything to help you and be there for you.
Yeah, well, it was extremely scary because it was like I was coming home to be alone, and then I was going into the office and being alone. It was like if something happens to me, no one's going to know.
Right.
Not that you guys wouldn't check it up on me, but you weren't there in person. So if something happened, it would be a little bit.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So next we're going to talk a little bit about our COVID situation as a family and what that looked like. Okay, so Mom, can you talk a little bit about what happened during COVID, how long we were sick, and your experience with that?
So you were living in Los Angeles and you were coming home for a weekend to visit us because we had a family member coming to from out of state to see us. But what we didn't know is he had COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So great weekend. We had a lot of fun, but we all got COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And so we didn't know what that meant.
Mm-hmm.
And it just seemed at first like a heavy duty cold. And for me, about day 10, all of a sudden, we're all taking cold medicine. It was when COVID was a new thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a problem, woke up one morning and have a problem breathing, and I had a hard time walking.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know what to do. And so I had to go to the hospital. I was in the hospital for a week. But I know we were all sick. Kate got it. She got well really fast. You and
After
your
like
dad.
a day. Yeah.
Yes, it was crazy. But we all got it, and it was not fun. It was 52 days for me. I was quarantined. And thank God, though, the hospital stay was amazing. They treated me really well. The one thing I learned was, crazy thing to say, but what they were telling us on the news and what the doctor was telling me and the nurses in the hospital were the polar opposite.
Yeah.
And so I got plasma, thank God, and within 24 hours things turned around for me and I started to get well. But I had to be quarantined from my family when I came home, which was crazy.
Yeah.
Totally crazy.
Yeah, that was extremely scary for us when you went to the hospital. It was like, we don't know if she's coming back. And Kate was a lot to herself, my sister, because I think she was struggling with it and she didn't really want to come out and talk to me and my dad. And then me and my dad were not as sick as my mom, but we were pretty sick. And after that, I've never felt the same. It took about 8 months for me to not feel the fatigue. I would just lay down all the time and just didn't feel like myself. I don't think any of us have felt like ourselves since then.
The fatigue was something out of another world.
Yeah.
I'd never experienced fatigue like that. Thank God I had a friend who told me to take bee pollen and spirulina.
Yeah.
And I started taking that, and that's what helped me walk out of the fatigue. But it was literally months and months from feeling that extreme fatigue.
Yeah. So next we're going to be talking about what happened with my health after COVID. After COVID, I started having a lot of weird infections, which I'm not going to go too deeply into, but no one could figure out what was going on. I was going to all these specialists. I was looking things up on the internet. No one could tell me what was happening. They would just slap some medicine on it, and honestly didn't help the situation. So to kind of aid that, I had researched and found that going on a sugar-free, yeast-free, basically gluten-free, all of those things on a diet, that it would basically starve the infection and that I would get better. Well, it did starve the infection. The infection went away, but I also myself was starving. I felt extremely hungry all of the time. I felt weak, and I just felt hungry no matter how much I ate in terms of protein and fruits and vegetables that I was allowed to eat on the diet. But after about a month and a half, 2 months, I decided I cannot do this anymore. This is just too much. But at that point, I'd already lost a lot of weight. I was 107 pounds. I was originally 122 pounds, went down to 107 pounds. So I'd lost a huge amount of weight, and nothing that I could do would help me regain that weight.
Right.
And the doctor told me I need to stop exercising. I needed to be careful about what I was doing. I needed to go on higher protein, introduce things back into my life. But it actually took about 2 years to gain that weight back. At this point, though, it was extremely scary, and I didn't know what was going on because of all the infections and me losing weight, not being able to gain it back. So, Mom, can you tell me a little bit about what that was like and what you were seeing as my mom?
Well, you were never overweight, but all of a sudden you started losing weight a lot, and that made me uncomfortable. I knew that wasn't a good thing for you. And you just, something was wrong. I couldn't tell what was wrong. all I could do was pray. And coming from a health food background and being a retired massage therapist and esthetician, I started seeking out maybe natural ways for you to gain some weight, maybe change your diet. Didn't quite know what was going on, but it was scary. But all I could do is pray and trust God. I mean, how did you feel? Tell me a little bit more about that.
I was really scared, and as you know, shortly after this, I started having a massive amount of pain in my joints and my muscles, in basically my whole body.
Right.
And I felt like I was much older than I was. I'm only, I was only in my early 20s at the time, so I shouldn't have been having that sort of pain. I felt like I had arthritis, or I didn't know quite what was going on, but it was a lot of pain at the time. And so obviously I went back to the doctor. Again, he couldn't really tell me what was going on, thought maybe I had sciatica. He sent me to the physical therapist. They helped me do exercises for my back, because it was the pain from my back causing pain all the way down the back of my legs, into my knees, into my feet. I had some issues before because I have flat feet. So I'd had, small amount of pain if I walk too much, but I had not really had many health problems in the past. So it was like, what's going on? And I really, was praying, but it just seemed clear to me that no one could give me an answer, at least in the area. So what did you think what was going on during that time? And how did you feel about the situation when I started having all of the pain?
Well, as I began to pray, I knew something was totally off. And the thought of Ehlers Danlos came to me because I had heard of that years before from my niece, possibly having that. But I knew that something wasn't right. All I could do was pray and seek God. And the fact that you were having all this extreme pain, especially, I knew, wait a minute, something, you need to have this checked out. So, I mean, for you, what do you think, you decided to go to the doctor and maybe have some things checked out, or what happened?
Well, they ran all these blood tests. They did all of these different checkups on me. I mean, they ran tests through the roof. Everything came back negative. And it was like, what exactly is going on? I had mentioned to the doctor the possibility of Ehlers Danlos running in my family, but he just said, no, that's not what it is. We don't think that's it.
Right. Yeah.
And so I felt kind of helpless, because that's the one thing I thought it could possibly be, especially since everything else was negative.
Right.
But I couldn't quite figure it out. I started to do all this research, but nothing really seemed clear to me. And then I started having those heart issues. I started having heart palpitations.
Oh, that's right.
And that doctor ran tests on me and said, oh yeah, we see you skip a beat, but that's normal. There's nothing going on. And so it just seemed like I'm having these health issues, but doctors aren't really taking it seriously. I mean, they're checking up on me, but they can't really give me an answer. And a lot of times I would get, you're young, you're healthy, you're totally fine, don't worry about it. There's nothing to worry about. But to me, it felt like I don't feel like myself. I feel unhealthy, uncomfortable, and a little afraid. Not that I didn't trust the Lord, but I just didn't know what was going on, and no one could seem to tell me what was happening.
Well, plus there was a question in the media with doctors talking about the fact that some young people were having some heart issues.
Yeah.
So we weren't sure exactly what was going on, but we knew that maybe COVID was at the root of the culprit of why you were having these issues.
Yeah. So next, we're going to be talking just a small amount about a relationship I had and how that affected my health a little bit further. So this will be a brief section, but I want to mention that I had a breakup about 6 months into my newfound health problems, and I just moved into a new house that I bought myself. I thought my life was going to be something different. This home was something me and my dad decided to do, to invest in, repurpose. It had previously been lived in by some squatters, so it needed a lot of help. And it was something exciting, but at the time, with breakup, with health problems, it just seemed to be a lot on me. Mom, you did say recently that you thought that this caused my condition to become worse. Is that right?
Well, so you and your dad were doing all of this massive work to fix
Yeah.
up this house. It was,
Mhm.
it was a big project.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you have this breakup. This
Yeah.
boyfriend breaks up with you. And it seemed as though that kind of pushed the button to cause you to have worse
Yeah.
body issues. And because I saw the emotional side coming in. And I think that ultimately for me, not just as your mom, but, being a person who had been a practitioner, I could see how stress was really affecting your health issues.
Yeah.
And all I could do is pray and seek God. And I knew it was the right thing for you. Okay. I knew your breakup was the right thing. He wasn't the right person for you, but still you were having all of these serious medical issues, and we needed to find answers.
Yeah.
So you tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I knew that it wasn't right. The relationship wasn't right for me, and I had been having dreams actually that we were going to break up. And I prayed that he would break up with me,
Right.
and he ended up doing that. And I knew that was meant to be, and I knew that was an answer to prayer, and I, was okay with that. It was for the better, definitely. But I think with that, I also lost my church family. I had to change churches. And at the time, I lost my friend group. And during COVID, it was really hard to make friends. And so they were all friends with each other. And so I just kind of had to go. And that was really difficult. So I was in this home by myself, living by myself. I had just had a breakup. I had just lost my friends. And so I felt extremely alone. And I think there were even times where I felt like there was a black cloud over my head. I was so depressed that there were even moments where I was questioning if I believed in God. And I have never, ever had an issue with that. And we had a little meeting with you, me, our, your side of the family, with all the girls, cousins, aunts. And they just really prayed for me and talked to me and said, snap out of this in a loving way. And after that, I started to go on the up and up. They all would check on me. You would check on me, just text me, say they're praying for me. And I think it took a little while, but the Lord started to work on me and used some friends as well to just show me certain things. And I realized that it was important to get out of that situation and that the Lord had better things for me.
No, I totally agree, but still, it's not easy, even though someone's not right for you, and you knew that the Lord had another plan for you, but life is short. And, I could see, the one thing that I could see for you was that you were dealing with some anxiety and depression. And even though it was a breakup, it seemed more that it was your health issues you were dealing with. And all I could do is love you and pray for you and encourage you. And I know your house was a light spot in that. So, I literally felt like I felt a little helpless. And so reaching out to ask others to pray for you were all I could do. But I did see God's hand. And I knew one thing, Reagan, that the Lord had a purpose for this situation. It's like the scriptures that talk about Joseph, that what man meant for bad, God meant for good. And so God got the glory in the end. And I knew that would happen, but it was hard to see it at the time. I just kept waiting and praying.
I agree.
So, what about, you felt like something specific was happening to you, though?
I didn't quite know at the time, but next section, I kind of want to talk a little bit more about my diagnosis and fast forward a little bit so we can talk about that next.
Well, didn't you kind of feel like, though, like a black cloud was hanging over your head?
Yeah, definitely. I didn't feel like myself at all mentally.
Yeah, and there is a verse in the Bible that talks about Satan coming to God and asking to sift people. And that's literally felt what it was like to me, because you were always a strong believer. I remember you as a little girl. There was a lady walking across the street, and you ran to the curb and you said, hey lady, do you know Jesus? So I knew that evangelism was very important to you and really close to your heart. And I literally felt like the enemy took a hit out on you and said, no, you know what? You're not going to use this girl. So, but you know what? Tough on him, because you got a praying mom and lots of praying people in your life.
Yeah.
And God is good.
Yeah, I agree. So I want to fast forward to my diagnosis, how that kind of all came to be. So I'd been sick for about a year and a half, maybe about 2 years.
Yes.
Well, 2 years up to my diagnosis. But I went hammocking, or to go hang out in hammocks with my friend Hannah and my sister Kate. And I ended up falling out of the hammock. And I landed with my feet like this on the ground, and it was only about this far from the ground, so it really wasn't that far, but I really hurt myself. My friend didn't realize I was really hurt. You know, she was kind of laughing, and then when I said, oh my gosh, I'm in pain, she was like, oh my gosh, are you okay? We left, and I was hurt for about a month, I think, but I ended up going to the doctor. He said I sprained everything from my feet all the way up to my hips.
Right.
And
which
so
seemed weird.
It was weird, especially because it was only a short distance, and he couldn't figure out how I sprained things so easily. That didn't seem normal to him.
Right.
It didn't seem normal to me either, because I never really had issues with that in the past.
Right.
And I've been at church where you're kind of kneeling with your feet back. Never had an issue before. Obviously, it was a little bit of a fall, but I never had problems with hurting myself like that. So I was extremely confused. I was in a lot of pain. But what was great was that this was the Lord's hand in showing me what was actually going on. So, Mom, what exactly did you think was happening? How did you feel during that situation?
Well, I remember just thinking to myself, oh, maybe you're blowing this out of proportion. Though, I mean, now I know you were not.
Yeah.
But again, the thought of Ehlers Danlos came to me, because I thought, wait a minute, or maybe something else. I just knew that it was not normal for your body to respond that way, especially being a massage therapist. I thought, uh-oh, there's something more going on here, and it's time for you to seriously find out exactly what is going on. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so as you know, some other things started happening. I don't know if you remember, but there were certain things that were happening that were really scary for me.
Yeah.
And I was really afraid, and I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
But I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that, since you and Dad were there when those things started to happen, and just how afraid I was. It wasn't that I didn't trust the Lord, but it was just like, what do I do? No doctor can help me. No one around me can help me. But what exactly was happening, and what do you see happening through that, including the depression and the physical issues?
Right. Well, I very specifically remember one day you came over, seems like it was after church or something.
Yeah.
And, I always do like dinner after church.
Yeah.
And you started crying and saying, am I going to die? There's something wrong. I don't understand what's happening with my body. Why do I feel this way?
Yeah.
And that's when you started to really kind of, the depression and anxiety, I think, came on because you could not change the situation with what was happening to your body, and you didn't really have an answer. And so I could totally see that you were having extreme fear. And all I could do is just hold you and pray for you and encourage you and help you. With that's also when you were starting to have issues with, you and your dad were doing some work at your house, and you loved woodworking, and you're very, very active person, always that way. And all of a sudden you started getting injuries from some of the things that you were doing.
Yeah, my hands swelled up.
Yes, to improve your house. Yes, you were having an issue where if your hands got cold, they would swell.
When I was sanding, they swelled completely where I couldn't move them for a couple days.
Yes, yeah, really weird stuff. And at first I'm like, wait a minute, is this really happening?
Yeah.
But I could see it right in front of me. And I was brought up where it's kind of like, you pull yourself up by your bootstraps. I'm a pretty tough woman, and I was a tomboy. It's like, hey, we could go do it. We can get it. We got, we're going to do this. But I realized, you couldn't just push this away. And
Yeah.
what I realized was there's something really happening here. We cannot ignore this. You can't just toughen it up
Yeah.
and push through this. We need to find out exactly what's going on. And all I could do is pray for your fear.
Yeah.
And your fear was real. And you really thought you were dying.
It wasn't a matter of trusting the Lord or not. I actually really trusted that the Lord had a plan. But what was scaring me was really the dislocations.
Yes.
I started,
yes.
my ribs started dislocating, my shoulders started dislocating, my thumbs, my fingers, all
You
of
were
that.
having a major problem with your hips.
Oh, yeah. And I didn't know how to put them back in. It was like I would dislocate and I would just literally be dislocated and not know how to put it back in.
Right.
And I you can pray and all of that. You could trust the Lord, but it's just like, okay, well, but how do I physically put my shoulder back into place?
Well, plus you were dealing with your fingers at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your fingers started having issues.
Yeah. So it was just like, I don't know how to move from here. I thought I was going to die. And if the Lord wanted me to die, that was okay. But it was just figuring out what to do in the moment. So the Lord's sovereign hand was in all of this. So going back to when I had the breakup, it was pretty clear that was from the Lord because I changed churches. I ended up getting a whole new friend group. And that was amazing. That was total blessing. Friends I still have. And one of these friends had just been diagnosed with Ehlers Danlos Syndrome, and she was talking about it. I asked her some questions. I told her I might possibly think that I had it, and I know that's something we thought that I could have had. The doctor kind of just blew it off. But I ended up meeting with her, and she recommended that I see her specialist. It took a while to get into him, but I started going to physical therapists. I had joined a support group in the area, and they all recommended this physical therapist. He's amazing, love him. But he also thought that I had Ehlers Danlos. He saw a lot of people with it, and so he really knew what he was talking about.
Right.
But he couldn't confirm that diagnosis just because he wasn't a doctor. It couldn't quite go on my medical records that way. But my depression increased greatly because moving forward, I ended up going to the specialist, and the specialist, he, after 5 minutes.
Yeah, you had to go to LA for that.
Yeah, so I went to LA with Dad. It took literally 10 hours, I think, to get there because there was snow on the Grapevine. We had to go around and go through snow through the Mojave Desert. It was crazy. But, I started having health issues during this time, even more health issues during this time with my stomach. I felt sick all the time. I didn't know what was going on. But after 5 minutes with this specialist, he literally was like, this woman has Ehlers Danlos Syndrome. He checked a couple things, my hand and everything, and that was his response. He also said that I had Raynaud's.
Right. Are they the ones that looked at your feet?
Yeah. He said that my feet were purple and really flat. And so he was like, what's going on? So he said, you have Raynaud's and you have Ehlers Danlos, and I didn't quite know how to cope with that.
Well, also, Reagan, talk a little bit about the thumb, how that's indicative, and then hernias.
Yeah. So I'd had a hernia about 4 years before that, maybe. And that's one of the things that can actually be a telltale sign. And then my fingers are really bendy. My thumbs have always been like this. My other fingers, not that I noticed, never.
Yeah, the hitchhiker thumb is like.
But yeah, all of us kind of have that
sign
on your side. And a lot of people can bend their fingers straight back. So with being a hereditary condition and having other family members, it was kind of clear with all of the health issues that was going on.
Well, also, there's like 15 of us that have had hernias, which is not normal. I had 2 as a child, and so did my twin sister, and she's had 1 as an adult, but lots of family members with hernias. Not normal.
Yeah. So this doctor ended up, as you know, he ran 1 million tests on me, different types of tests, x-rays, blood tests, all of the things in between. And that all confirmed I didn't have anything but Ehlers Danlos Syndrome and then the Raynaud's that I mentioned.
Well, why don't you tell everybody what is Ehlers Danlos?
Yeah. So Ehlers Danlos is a connective tissue disorder, and it's hereditary. And the type that I have is hypermobile Ehlers Danlos. So that's the one that you cannot find through a gene. So it actually a couple months before had a genetic test, but they couldn't find anything, and that basically they just say, well, there's nothing we can do. You got to go check with the doctor. So the only way to tell that you have hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos is through a checklist, a literal checklist. And if a doctor doesn't know about Ehlers-Danlos, they don't know about the checklist, or they don't feel confident enough to check those things off and diagnose you. So that was kind of happening. And with that, with all the tests that they had done, I kind of went into even more depression, because it was like, okay, well, this is confirmed. I met with my friend again, and we cried together.
Right.
We sat together, we talked about it, how it's a little scary, but the Lord is in charge, and we really just trusted in the Lord. She invited me to a suffering class. We ended up going to that. I'll talk a little bit about that in the future. But I was told I couldn't hike anymore. I couldn't do anything strenuous. I couldn't rock climb. I couldn't go horseback riding. I couldn't dance anymore. I'd been going dancing with my new group of friends, and I was really enjoying that.
Yeah, swing dancing.
Yeah, swing dancing. And I was actually really good at it. So it was pretty sad for me, because it was like I lost my independence that I had always had. I was really out there, really extroverted, really upbeat. I never had any issues. I was always the life of the party, in a Christian way, not any crazy way, but just in terms of me being just really present, really social. But it was extremely nerve-wracking for me to figure this out. So what was this like when I received this news? And I mean, you were a far away when we called you to tell you, hey, this is what's going on.
Well, to be quite honest, it was a slight relief, because at least we could understand and now walk forward and deal with exactly what was going on.
Yeah.
When you came home, you gave me more details of what it would look like. And the funny thing is that even as a child, I was always very, very bendy, didn't think anything. I could never do the splits. That's what's crazy.
Me neither.
But I could put my leg over my head, and all of my fingers would, do funky things. I can't remember what you call that, but double jointed and very, very limber. Lots of us are that way. So I always thought that was kind of fun, but I had no idea what the medical repercussions of Ehlers-Danlos were. And so when you came home and you started to share with me the details of what that could really mean, how it could affect every organ of your body, your brain, your heart. That's why you were having the heart issues. And also the light bulb went on for me to understand that's why your sister, our other daughter, who she's now 22, she was having issues having to wear braces on her ankles, her knee. She has one hip that pops in and out and pain. And more recently having the stomach issues, because there's stomach issues that come with it, with a mast cell disorder. But I knew that God would take care of it. All I knew is He gave us an answer. Now, Lord, we're going to walk forward and figure out, what do you want us to do with this? There's a purpose for this. You're going to get the glory, God.
So, of course, my journey didn't end there, but that's for a different day. Just to kind of end things off, I wanted to thank you for listening. And as you can see, the Lord worked through every single moment. Next time, we'll get into the difficulty of my diagnosis, if it wasn't difficult already, and how the Lord drew me closer to Him. It's important to note that it's normal to struggle with trials and tribulations, but the Lord uses these things to grow us to Him and grow us to be more like Him as well. Peace out, Girl Scouts.